With me, to my left here, is attorney extraordinaire Benton Ross Watson. Ross, you did an awesome job last week. How'd you like doing a show for the first time on your own?
Oh man, dirty deeds done dirt cheap.
Okay, very good. Well, you look good. I was reviewing the show, and man, you did really well. So this week, we got some interesting topics here. We've got what to do, how to handle a traffic stop with and without a license to carry. There's a chapter in my teaching manual that basically says you do it one way if you got a license and one way if you don't have a license on you. But the third way is if you don't have a license at all. So why don't you open up with what you... I see all those notes here. Why don't you just start it off and tell us what you're thinking about that particular
Well, I don't know exactly what the LTC manual says, but I'll just say first off,
well, let me set it up then.
The code's going to require you to display your license to carry.
Not exactly. Let me clarify.
If they ask for identification, right?
But here's where the problem is. It says if you got the license on you and an officer or magistrate asks for any form of ID, you must show your license and your driver's license and your license to carry if you have the gun on you.
Or identification certificate issued by the department.
But here's the key. If you have the gun on you. If you don't have the gun on you, the law doesn't require you to do that. However, the officer's going to find out you got it when he calls in dispatch.
And we're going to talk about that.
And they're going to get upset. So now that the public knows what we're talking about, go ahead.
Okay, so just a general rundown of Fourth Amendment search and seizure law. Okay, you're going to have a consensual encounter, right? Which means that any police officer can come up to you on the street just like any other normal person. If I see you walking on the street and I want to come up and talk to you, I'm not a police officer, I want to come and talk to you, say, hey man, you got marijuana in your pocket? You can tell me to go jump in the lake if you want to, or you can sit there and tell me about it. Okay, and not to say that you would, but just you look like a culprit, perpetrator. So you're a good example. Anyway, so if I would, a police officer got the same right to do that. And so when we're talking about a traffic stop situation, they got to have reasonable suspicion to stop your vehicle. And reasonable suspicion doesn't mean that they actually have to know that you committed a crime. Okay, it could be maybe there's an obscure light on one of the tail lights that may or may not show a crack. Okay, if the police officer thinks maybe that there is a crack, he might be able to stop you because he reasonably suspected that crime was afoot. Not necessarily that you actually committed a crime, but that maybe that happened. Or maybe there's something wrong with your license plate, frame. Maybe it's a little bit off and he wants to double check. Maybe it looks like the light's flickering. Whatever. It's not for sure there's a crime, but there's something there, suspicious circumstance connected to crime. So if he stops you in this point, okay, this becomes a traffic stop. And any kind of traffic stop, a police officer is going to be allowed to ask you for your identification, check your registration, and ask for insurance. And so if you're carrying a weapon in your car at this time, okay, technically the government code section is going to say that, yes, when they ask for identification, if you're carrying that weapon, you're going to have to display your ID or your driver's license, right, as well as a license to carry a handgun. But here's the thing. In 2009, the legislature removed the teeth from this law. So it used to be a Class B misdemeanor not to do this. As it stands, there is no technical violation of this law. So if you do not show your license to carry, it's not classified as any kind of offense, and it's not an offense technically under that provision. However, it's not that simple. Okay, so under Texas Penal Code 46-2, okay, we're talking about unlawful carrying of weapons. It was further confounded by the legislature's, passing of the new open carry laws, because then they added some non-applicability sections in a few subsections below in 46-15. So let's put it like this: it's unlawful to carry a weapon, a handgun, unless you have a license to carry. Correct?
In 99.9% of the time, yes.
Right, unless you're on your own premises, right, or you're traveling, something to that effect. Okay. In your own car.
Okay. Yes.
Okay. Or traveling to or from your own car.
There you
okay.
go.
And then, but otherwise, it's going to be a crime, okay, to be carrying a firearm unless you have an LTC. Okay, so
we're
let's
talking handguns here.
Handguns. So let's say you're walking down the street, and the police officer wants to stop you. Well, technically, the way that they've got this worded is they don't have any exceptions in there for the license to carry holder. It just says, right, if a person is licensed to carry. But then 4615 B6 says, right, 46.2 does not apply to a person who is carrying a license issued under the government code section chapter 411, okay, and a handgun in a concealed or open in a holster. Okay, so if that means you've got to be carrying it, right, for that section not to apply, one gets several vague interpretations. And I think for purposes of here today, I think a very reasonable interpretation would be that the police officer is entitled to assume that you are unlawfully carrying a weapon unless you are also, if you're a handgun, meaning a handgun in this situation. A police officer is allowed to assume that you are unlawfully carrying a handgun unless you have that license on you if you're walking. If you're walking somewhere that's not on your own premises or to or from your vehicle. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, and so I think that a police officer at least is going to get out of any civil liability for arresting you, okay, if you do not, or if you're not carrying your license to carry, okay, and so that's all the more reason why you should just show the police officer the license, okay. The other interpretation of this is under 46.2 A-1. That's the motor vehicle provision. When you're in your motor vehicle, okay, then you're allowed to have a weapon without a license. But if it's out in the open,
right,
okay, you're going to be in trouble.
Correct.
Okay, so this section says, though, if a person commits an offense, if the person intentionally, knowingly, recklessly carries on about his person a handgun in a motor vehicle that is owned by the person or under the person's control at any time in which the handgun is in plain view, unless the person is licensed to carry a handgun under the government code and it is carried in a shoulder or belt holster. Okay. So this one actually references the law directly and doesn't say anything about, the person being licensed to carry. And so, it actually says directly, mentions about the person, as opposed to 46.2A, which doesn't mention the license to carry. In other words, one directly mentions your license. A-1 directly mentions the license, whereas A does not. Mm-hmm. And so it seems like the non-applicability portion that we talked about that said you must be carrying the license, it seems redundant and superfluous, like it doesn't apply. And so I don't know what would happen in this situation, but that's the whole point of why I'm telling you this. And if you're confused, you should be. Okay? Bottom line is, a police officer may well be within his every right to arrest you, all right, if you're not carrying the license on you because of the way that the code is worded. Okay, such that if you're carrying and he asks you and you don't have the license on you, he would probably be well within his right to arrest you, right, for unlawful carry. Now, I don't believe that you're guilty of that necessarily, but
are you talking right now as if you're not in your vehicle?
Both.
Because in the vehicle you have the ability to have it there as long as it's concealed.
Exactly, but that's what I'm saying. If it's in plain view, if you're
Okay.
violating that section in plain view, unless it's in a holster in your license to carry.
That I get. Okay, I thought you were
And
talking
so,
specifically.
and I'm saying that one's even more ambiguous and even more vague than the first one. Whereas if you're walking down in just a public street or something like that, you're walking out and you have your handgun open carry. If it's concealed, nobody probably doesn't know.
If you could generalize this in a safe, generalized term or explanation as to what to do, what would you give as a...
I don't think that if you don't have your license and you refuse to show your license, that you technically violated the government code section that requires you to show your license upon request of identification. But if you don't have your license and you don't show it to a police officer, right, you're going to run the risk of giving that police officer the authority to arrest you for unlawful carry. Does that make sense?
Honestly, I'm a little confused.
Yeah, and you should be.
I'm a little confused on the way you're explaining, because I know
So
you're getting so detailed, and I totally dig it, but it becomes confusing.
Right, and so I'm telling you, if you're carrying your firearm on your handgun, okay, I keep saying firearm, so we're talking about handguns here naturally, okay?
Strictly handguns, yeah.
Okay, if you're carrying your handgun on you, you better have your license.
Yes.
And you better show the police officer. That's it.
Okay, that's the you better show your police officer as a general rule, because there's a technical thing in the rules that says if you don't have the gun on you, you don't have to show it.
Right, and unless the police officer, and we'll get into this, stop. Okay, unless the police officer suspects you of a dangerous crime or something, or you're reckless driving. If it's a traffic stop, right? Most police officers, I think, if you have an LTC, they're probably going to feel a little more comfortable, right? Unless you're being combative, unless you're arguing with them. If you're comfortable, not nervous, and it's a speeding deal, and and they ask you, and you say, "Hey, man, I got a gun right here in my console, and I'm an LTC guy," they're probably not going to act any different than in any other case.
Look,
okay?
an officer 90% of the time,
But that's a good question for me.
Is doing his job, and when he does his job, the person he's doing the job to, there needs to be that mutual respect. We talk about this all the time. If the officer requests the information, just get it done and be on your way. Now, there's other people, and I know this as a fact. There are some officers whose badge makes their head 10 times bigger than it is, and they just get this power trip. And those are the ones that irritate you, and you say, screw you, okay? But in general, if you're pulled over by an officer, hey, there's a reason. He's pulling you over for some reason. Just go through the motions and do what you got to do and be on your way, okay?
That's what I said. At one show we had, I said, at some point, gosh, after your rights have been violated and the officer just doesn't get over the stop, at some point, yeah, okay, say screw you or whatever you want to say, but generally speaking, that doesn't help you.
No, it doesn't help you at
Okay,
all.
it's going to hurt the situation, and you're not going to do yourself any favors. And plus, if something does happen, right, the jury's going to love you, okay, if you're respectful and you're following and you're cooperative and you're doing everything, and then the police officer still goes off and does something that is an abuse of authority, the jury's just going to fall in love with you. But even if the cop is wrong, if you start going off and mouthing back at the police officer, you're going to ruin your chances to get damages.
All right, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to say what I think you just said in as brief a form, because I'm a simple guy. I'm a 50-cent kind of guy, okay? You're a dollar guy. You got college. You're educated. I'm not. So I'm going to say it in 50-cent terms. You stop me when I go off track. If you're walking down the street and you've got a weapon on you, whether it's open or concealed, and an officer for some reason decides to stop you or for identification, you must show him your driver's license, identification, and your license to carry. Okay? If you're in a vehicle and an officer pulls you over and the weapon is either in a holster, shoulder, or a belt holster, open or concealed carry, and you have a license to carry, you must show both your driver's license and your license to carry. Okay? That's it. Outside those parameters, officer has the legal right to arrest you if he wishes to do so.
And plus, if the officer nowadays in most of the computer systems, I think even Milan County, right, they're going to see that you have a license to carry. And so if you go up and you don't even mention license to carry,
That's right.
That's going to make them a little nervous.
That's why I tell my students, I don't care if you don't have the gun on you and the statute says you don't have to show him your license. He's going to find out and he's going to get pissed. Whether you got the gun on you or not, show
Right.
him your driver's license and your license to carry.
Yeah, and say, hey, I'm a licensed to carry holder, but I'm not carrying my weapon today.
Yeah. Okay.
Even if you're not carrying it. I would say that because they're going to see it and they're going to be wondering probably in the back of their head, what's going on.
All right, let's go a little further now, since time's a ticking here. I want to talk about the
I want to say this. I'm sorry.
What's that?
Let's say that you want to fight a battle that's not a good battle to fight, and this is maybe the police being a prick, and you want to stand your ground and stand your rights. They didn't have a right to stop you, and that's completely understandable. Delaware versus Prowse said, a police officer can't stop you just to check your license. Okay, and so they need to have some kind of reasonable suspicion. But again, if they know you're carrying open, right, they're going to assume that you're unlawfully carrying unless you're carrying your license.
Right.
And that's what I'm not saying that's right, but that's what the law is going to stand. You're going to risk getting arrested. And if you do that, if you get arrested, your LTC is probably going to be suspended.
That's right. Snowball
Okay,
effect. It
so
just goes downhill
yeah,
from there.
and you're gonna see Lisa Roden down at Twin Pistols Bail Bond. You're gonna have to get bailed out. Probably gonna have to hire a lawyer just to talk to somebody. I'm sorry. Go ahead. What you were saying?
I just wanted to move on to the next phase of it. What if the officer feels it's necessary to search a vehicle? Give us some parameters on how they're allowed to. What's some terminology? Can you just say no? Because here's what I would do. If an officer decides he wants to search my vehicle and he makes it anything other than a demand, I'm going to say respectfully, officer, thanks, but no thanks. I'm not going to do it. Now, if he demands me, I'm not going to argue the officer because there's something going on. Okay, but if I'm being commanded to get out of the vehicle because he's going to search my vehicle, I'm going to say, well, whatever. I'm going to get out because I know that ain't the place to fight it. But if I have the option, I'm going to say no. I don't want you. There's nothing in this vehicle for you to search.
Well,
Go ahead.
if there's nothing in the vehicle, let them search. But if there's something in the vehicle, tell them no. Okay, no, I'm just playing. I generally always tell them no, and I've been asked maybe 3 times in my life. Okay, and the first reason is I'll call his name out, Chris Stringer. Okay, when I was in high school, searched my vehicle. I think it was on July 4th. He just knew he was going to get me on something. We didn't have anything in the truck at all. And I said, yeah, go ahead, search it. Okay, I was there for 2.5 hours. Okay, well, I don't say yes anymore. Okay, I love Chris. You're a good guy. He's a great guy, right? We're friends now and everything, and he's a good police officer. But he's the reason, okay, that I say no every time. And every time I said no, they said, oh, okay. And they've just gone about their way. And a lot of police officers are good at sniffing stuff out. And a lot of times they know, well, I don't really have anything. And they'll ask you, I can't tell you how many guys I've had, and I've just been like, why did you tell them they could search? They had nothing. Mm-hmm. And the police officer asked him, and there's nothing wrong. It's good police work. Good police
exactly.
work, right?
The police officer's doing his job. He's checking it out, and if you go for it, you went for it.
Yeah, and they said, yeah. And they go in and search, and there's a doobie sitting right there in the cup holder. I'm like, man, what is wrong with you? And so, but the problem is we don't know how many times that I wish I could accurately tell clients, say yes, and then they're not going to be suspicious. Well, police officers are going to do their job, period.
Well, what is the terminology that an officer has to say that you don't have a choice? I mean, because sometimes, would you mind if I checked your vehicle? That's a clear option that says, yes, you can, or no, I'm sorry, you can't. As compared to, get out of the car, I'm searching your car.
And it's hard to tell, too, because if they have probable cause, right, let's say they smell marijuana.
Do you want to say it? Okay, we're good.
Let's assume they smell marijuana or something like that. A good police officer is still going to ask you for consent, right? Because then he doesn't have to prove there's no credibility issues. There's nothing like that. The police officer, if he gets consent, Fourth Amendment's out the window. Done, right? Unless there's some kind of pretextual problem with the stop to begin with. So a good police officer is always going to ask you for consent, right? Even if they got probable cause, so you never know. Right? Either when they ask you for consent, either they ain't got anything, and they need that extra, exemption from the Fourth Amendment to get in, or they already got probable cause and they're just trying to make their case stronger.
Right.
Okay, and so that's what I'm saying. I don't think yes, if you deny them the right to search, there can probably be some suspicion, very little though, right? For them to go on, it can be extra suspicion. Right, under the Fourth Amendment to allow them a reason to develop reasonable suspicion or probable cause. But courts don't like that. They don't like using a denial of a right to of a request to search, right, as a factor in the probable cause and reasonable suspicion analysis. So if you don't want them to search, tell them no. Just be respectful about it. Say, officer, I just I'm a real constitutionalist. Right?
Oh gosh, don't say that.
Yeah, whatever you want to say. Whatever you want to say to explain.
I've seen videos on that one, man. Gosh, they just go irate when you say that kind of stuff.
In most cases, an experienced police officer is going to know whether he has a right to get in that vehicle or not. And when he asks you permission, he already knows whether he needs to get into it or not. And if you've got nothing to hide, I'm along with him. Just let them search it. But if you got something, say no. And make them go one step further if they have to. I have a question while we're talking about this, if I could. All right, you've got a gun in your car. You don't have a license to carry, but you legally have it in your car.
Thank you.
Now, the police officer stops you and says, is there anything in my car that could harm me? What do you say? What would you suggest?
Now, let's clarify something, though. Your vehicle is almost like your house.
Yes.
There's a little bit of difference, okay?
Well, neither is a lie. If you say no, the gun's not going to harm you because I'm not going to shoot you with it. There's nobody else in the vehicle. So I don't see anything wrong with saying no, there's nothing in the car that's going to harm you.
Yeah, but if an officer came to my front door and goes to me and says, is there anything harmful in your house? I go, well, it's none of your business. It's my house. If I'm a law-abiding citizen and you pull me over in my car, is there anything and I don't have a license, okay? If I don't have a license, I'm going to go, I'm good, man. You're not coming in my car. Thank you very much. I respect you. But no, you're not coming in here. There's no reason for me to answer that question. It's my house.
And you got every right to say that. From a police standpoint, I don't think even you could sit here and say that answer to that question is automatically going to raise suspicion. It's probably fact intensive. It's probably going to depend on the circumstances.
Totality of the circumstances.
Right, and
Exactly.
so if it's just a standard traffic stop and that's a routine question or something that police officers happen to ask that day, yes or no may not make a difference in the world. But if it's at 3 a.m, a mile from a bar, right, Saturday night, you're getting into circumstances where the police officer may be a little more concerned about, whether or not you have something dangerous in the car or not.
One of the most confusing things that I've always had asked me is, okay, I've got my car, I've got a gun in there, I've got a handgun in there. Do I have to tell the police officer I've got the handgun in there? According to the law, you don't technically have to do that because that falls under the old-fashioned traveler statute that is no longer. So, but a lot of people think that you got to tell them right off the bat, I've got a gun in my car, and they're not doing anything wrong. Maybe they ran a stop sign. That's all they did. No other circumstances, no exigent circumstances at all. And technically, they don't have to tell you they've got a gun in there. I don't believe.
Right. If it's not in plain view, they haven't violated any
Exactly.
law. But even if it is in plain view,
Yeah.
they don't have to incriminate themselves.
Right.
So they don't have to say, yes, there is a weapon in here that's I'm unlawfully carrying. Arrest me, officer. It would be.
Yeah.
I wouldn't advise you to do that. But as far as what the police officer perceives, that's probably going to be very circumstance based on just the stop in general.
And technically, they haven't violated the law if that gun's in there out of sight. Correct?
That's correct, but what is that? We've talked about before. What is out of sight? I've had guys arrested for unlawful carry when it's tucked underneath the seat. Because is that in plain view? If at what point is it plain view?
Right.
There's always some ambiguities, right? As far as what is and what is not in plain view. But yes, if it's in the console or something like that, I feel like that's not in plain view.
Exactly.
And so, I don't think they have to tell you.
Yeah.
But I mean,
And it boils down to the common sense of who the officer is. They need to train. I don't care what officer is. They need to train to understand this law. Because if they go one step further and they just dig a gun out that's not in plain sight, that's a supervisory issue there.
Chief, when you were on the street, would you stop people with the thought processes of you're guilty until I think you're not guilty, or do you go to the individual and say, this is just another Joe, I'm doing my job, and if I find something, I'll take it from there? Or do you have that attitude as an officer to go?
it probably depends.
Yeah, it depends on the situation.
I'll give you credit for that.
It depends on the time, space,
Well, yeah,
location.
granted.
In most cases, I was a little bit different. I always gave people the benefit of the doubt. There's black and white and there's gray, and I always gave people the gray because I always tried to err on the side of the citizen.
Mm-hmm.
But there's times when the hair on the back of your neck stood up and you knew there was something wrong, and then you go one step further.
Well, I can understand. Yeah, I totally get that. But I'm talking as a generality. Just it's 3:00 in the afternoon. It's a basic traffic stop. You're on the highway. Boom.
I was cautious, but I never was overcautious. That makes sense. Because I'm telling you, if you and people don't like to hear this, but if it's your time as a police officer, it's your time as a police officer.
Wow. It's your time when the net comes and you're the fish. And the net picks you up. It's
That's
your
it.
time. You never know what's going to happen. All right, look, we got a few minutes left. Ladies and gentlemen, the number here is 254-697-6633. Somebody give me a call real quick. Tell me a story that you've been pulled over, if it went great or if it went bad. I want to hear it real fast. Give me a call, 254-697-6633. Go. Start dialing now.
Well, I want to say this is pretty. There's been a Sixth Circuit case say that a police officer doesn't have a right just to stop you. I think the name of it was Northrop versus City of Toledo Police Department. It was a Sixth Circuit. It was a 3-judge panel though, which means it wasn't a full court deciding it. Right, it was only a 3 judges out of that court, and it was out of the Sixth Circuit, so it's not binding on Texas, and it's not a United States Supreme Court case. But there was a man walking a dog. He had a pistol in his hip holster, so it was open carry. Okay, and there was a call from a concerned citizen, kind of like C.J. Grisham case, but this was a handgun. That court ruled that it was unlawful under the Fourth Amendment for the police officer to go and request identification and a license to carry, and that it violated his Fourth Amendment rights because it was the same as Prowse. It's unlawful to drive without a license. It's unlawful to drive a car without a license. So they're saying here it's unlawful to carry a handgun without a license. And if it's unlawful just to stop people to check their license for the vehicle, then it's also unlawful to stop and check their license right, for carrying a handgun.
Makes
But
sense to me.
But the thing is I read a statistic, I think it was from 2016, it's 97% of people don't have a license to carry. Okay, whereas, almost everybody has a license to drive that's of age. And so police officers can make a good argument, the state's going to be able to make a good argument that there's a 97% chance, okay, that a person that's walking with a handgun in a holster that's open carry, right, there's a 97% chance that person is not licensed to carry. And so I can see the counter. We'll just have to wait and see. Stay tuned for the result of all that argument.
You got a guy with his family and he's open carrying and he's in the city park on the bench having a picnic with the family, and then you got another guy wearing his hat sideways, pants down, his rear end, and he's packing heat on the side. I mean, I can see where you might check one as compared to the other, but that's what I'm just saying. An officer, I would have a problem with an officer just going to people because of what you just said. The probability might be higher that they don't have a license and they're carrying the gun illegal. You just can't do it,
And there's a big push. It's a big deal in the legislature, and they even passed amendments trying to make it unlawful for police. But
Ross, tell everybody how they get a hold of you.
105 East Main Street in Cameron, Texas, right across the street from the courthouse. Big milk cow on the side of the building. You can't miss it. Phone number is 254-605-4140. You can email me at benton@watson.legal, benton@watson.legal. It's always a pleasure.
And
or you can find Rick Dodd. He knows where to find me.
And ladies and gentlemen, I just want to say this whole segment is sponsored by Coppolino Dodd Craib's law firm, so we want to thank them very much for doing that. So we'll see you on the other side.
Cameron prides themselves on service, resourcefulness, knowledge,
Anytime if you want.
and attention to detail.